To this ELPC Thinks webinar, the Data Center Dilemma. My name is Karsten Neumeister, and I'm a Media Relations Specialist with ELPC. ELPC Thinks is where we bring experts, environmental leaders, and community partners together to forge new strategies for progress. Quick heads up, we will be recording this webinar and streaming live on Facebook to share it with folks who are not able to join us. Today, we're honored to have Brad Klein, ELPC Managing Attorney and Head of our Energy Team, and Saad Siddique, ELPC Economist and Energy Analyst, joining us to discuss data centers in the Midwest. Now, we know there are a lot of important issue areas to cover around data centers, including clean water, land use, noise, and light pollution, but today our focus is going to be on clean energy. So we'll answer questions like, how do data centers impact our electricity costs? Could they jeopardize our clean energy goals? How are utilities and lawmakers responding? What policies should be employed to ensure data centers pay their fair share and help us meet our clean energy goals? At any time, if you'd like to ask a question, please click the Q&A icon on your screen and type in your question. We'll get to as many questions as we can in the program, and we will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So Brad, Saad, thank you both so much for being here. And with that, I will pass it over to you two.
Can everyone see the slides?
Yep, I see you.
Looks good on my end. Well, thank you so much, Karsten. Thanks everybody for joining us today. We have a really good turnout. It's a very interesting topic. In my time here at ELPC, going on nearly 20 years, this is one of the most exciting and challenging times for our clean energy work. So we're excited to share some of that with you today. Saad, can you advance the slide? We'll just roadmap a bit of what we're going to talk about today. First, Saad will go through some just background and context for everyone. What are we talking about when we talk about data centers? Let's level set a little bit. He will then present some of the primary challenges facing our clean energy team and really the electric industry at large. And then I'll come in and talk a little bit about the opportunities, some of the work that ELPC is doing and what we're trying to do to achieve and maintain clean energy progress as we're now starting to see load growth from data centers. And we'll have some, as Karsten mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion at the end. I think our presentation should be around, a little less than a half hour, and then we'll reserve some time for discussion. So without further ado, I will pitch it to my colleague Saad to kick us off.
Thank you, Brad, for setting up the roadmap so clearly. Let me start with the basics of what we are dealing with. Data centers are essentially warehouses filled with thousands of computer servers that power everything from your Netflix stream to artificial intelligence applications. These facilities require enormous amounts of electricity to run the servers and to keep them cool, operating 24 hours a day and 365 days a year. Where are they showing up? A lot of them are right here in the Midwest. Illinois alone has over 28 gigawatts of data center projects in its utility Commonwealth Edison or ComEd's pipeline. To put that in perspective, ComEd's all-time peak demand in its 118-year history was just under 24 gigawatts compared to the 28 gigawatts that's in pipeline for new data centers. And how much power do they use? Individual projects in ComEd's pipeline range from 112 megawatts to 2.3 gigawatts. The average project size over the last 12 months has been 700 megawatts, which ComEd describes as roughly equivalent to 1,400 big box retail stores running simultaneously, or 700,000 residential homes to run one data center. The Midwest is particularly attractive because of a relatively stable electric grid and historically lower energy costs. But as we'll see, that stability and affordability is now at serious risk.
So to clarify for the non-experts out there, Saad, 1 gigawatt is roughly equivalent to the amount of power to power a million homes. So 28 gigawatts in ComEd's queue, that's 28 million homes. And you also said ComEd's current capacity is 24 gigawatts. So am I understanding correctly that the data center demand in ComEd's queue is over double its current capacity?
That's exactly correct. To run one data center, you need electricity that's equivalent to serving 100,000 or 1,000,000 homes, residential homes. And the demand for new data centers is going to more than double the current electricity peak load of ComEd in its territory. For decades, as you can see on the graph, US electricity consumption remained relatively flat or grew modestly. We became more efficient thanks to LED lights, better appliances, and improved building codes. Utilities planned for steady and predictable growth of 1 to 2% annually. That era seems to be over. We're now facing unprecedented demand growth driven primarily by data centers, supporting artificial intelligence and cloud computing. According to industry experts, data center electricity demand could consume as much as 12% of all US electricity by 2030. Now, this isn't a gradual change. It's exponential growth. One of US's largest regional electricity markets operator, PJM, in their latest forecast, show that 32 gigawatts of peak load growth is going to come online probably by 2030, with data centers representing 30 gigawatts of that growth. That's 94% of all new demand coming from data centers alone. To put this in perspective, electricity demand that was flat for years and is now projected to grow at rates not seen since the 1950s through 1970s. This represents the biggest shift in electricity demand since the post-World War II electrification boom. This chart from Synapse Energy shows just how uncertain our load growth projections have become. We're seeing forecasts that range widely because no one really knows how fast data center development will occur or how much electricity these AI applications will ultimately consume. What we do know is concerning. ComEd's 28 gigawatt pipeline would increase Illinois' electricity consumption by 123%, as we just discussed, and it's more than doubling the statewide electricity use in the next 15 years. Other utilities are seeing, yeah, go ahead, Karsten.
Sorry, Saad. I was just going to ask, why are the projections between low and high scenarios so drastically different? Like, is it that we don't know how efficiency is going to improve, or that we just don't know if over doubling load growth in this amount of time is even feasible? Like, how is the unknown such a wide spectrum?
It is both those factors. So when data centers or big tech companies decide to build a data center, they go around shopping in multiple states and utilities like everybody does. You check out which state and utility offers them the best deal. So they have inquiries with multiple utilities for the same data center they want to build. And the projections come from the inquiries that the utilities receive. So a lot of this is double counting. And because of this, these projections are kind of inflated. And the other thing is that these projections do not include the efficiency gains that we'll see through better technology in the future years. And so this is kind of inflated. And because it is so hard, you can see the big numbers of doubling the infrastructure in just 15 years. It is probably not likely that all of these will get built. And that is why there is this uncertainty, and we still have to figure out how to get the uncertainty down.
So you're saying utilities in 4 different areas might all have the same request from one data center, and that data center is only going to end up being built in one.
That's right.
Okay.
We're seeing similar patterns in other utilities. Georgia Power, for example, anticipates that its total energy sales will nearly double by the early 2030s, largely due to data centers. Now, this uncertainty creates enormous challenges for utility planning, resource procurement, and ultimately for keeping electricity affordable and reliable for everyone else. Utilities now have to make billion-dollar infrastructure investments based on projections that could change dramatically. Let's talk about three key challenges that we are seeing because of this increased data center load demand. The first major challenge we're facing is rapidly rising electricity prices, and data centers are demonstrably the primary reason. In PJM, that's our regional electricity market, residential prices increased over 20% in 2025. The capacity auction, which ensures we have enough power plants, cleared at $267 approximately per megawatt day in July 2024. And compared to the previous year, it was $29. So that's nearly a tenfold increase in just 1 year. And in MISO, the Mid-Continent ISO, our other regional market, capacity prices jumped from about $30 to $666 per megawatt day. And according to MISO's own analysis, they assume up to 41% of announced data center projects won't actually be built. Yet, prices are still skyrocketing based on the remaining demand.
So another point of clarification here, one, PJM is the regional transmission operator on the map image that we have here on the left, and MISO is north to south US, Minnesota down to Louisiana. You mentioned, Saad, there's a tenfold increase in capacity auction prices, and I just want to clarify what that means. Like capacity charges are what we spend on reserve power, so like emergency power for when the grid is stressed. So is that what's getting so expensive? It's that emergency reserves that we need for these events, and if so, how does that translate to what people are seeing on their month-to-month bills?
That's right. These capacity prices don't proportionally transfer to customer bills, but there is an impact on customer bills. For ComEd customers specifically, capacity charges which is a line item on their electricity bills, increased from about $2.7 per month for a typical residential customer to $24 per month this year from last year, which is a huge increase again. That translates to an additional $255 per year for the average household, and this is just the beginning.
And so you can see that on your electricity bill, like capacity charges for this very occasion here.
Yes. And these aren't small adjustments. These are massive price spikes that hit customer bills and represent a fundamental shift in how electricity markets are functioning. And the primary reason for this, data centers. Don't take my word for it. This comes directly from PJM's independent market monitor, that is the official watchdog for our electricity markets. Their analysis states unequivocally, data center load growth is the primary reason for recent and unexpected capacity market conditions, including total forecast load growth, the tight supply and demand balance, and high prices. The monitor calculated that data center load growth by itself resulted in an increase of over $9.3 billion in just the last capacity auction, which is a 174% increase from the previous auction. Now, here's the key injustice. Ratepayers are subsidizing the AI industry's massive power needs through higher bills. As Harvard researchers documented in a study, utility ratepayers are paying for big tech's power infrastructure through higher rates, while struggling families see their electricity bills skyrocket.
Thanks, Saad. And as Brad mentions here, those capacity charges we're talking about show up in the supply section of your bill if you're curious to take a look at that. And Jessica, to your question, we'll send the links around at the end of the presentation as well.
And let's talk about the second challenge. The second major challenge is the unprecedented infrastructure burden of connecting these massive loads to our electric grid. The numbers are staggering. ComEd's current pipeline includes over 75 unique projects, with many seeking to interconnect at 138 kilovolt and 345 kV transmission levels. These aren't small distribution connections, which are usually used by most customers of the grid. These are transmission level connections that require massive infrastructure investments.
And Saad is correct that in a lot of these cases, these million to $100 million transmission lines are being built to literally serve one data center.
Yes. Let me give you a sense of the scale. In Michigan, Consumers Energy estimates it would need up to $17 billion in new power plants alone to serve just its projected data center growth. ComEd's own data shows that large loads have paid only 8.2% of the interconnection costs, while the remaining 91.8% is socialized across all customers. This means ordinary families and businesses are paying for the electric infrastructure needed to power big tech's data centers. Now, why is this? The utilities business model is designed to incentivize building more infrastructure rather than rewarding efficiency. This is because utilities receive a guaranteed rate of return on the infrastructure they build, which increases both their top and bottom line. This complicates the equation for discouraging the construction of expensive and polluting fossil fuel power plants, thereby putting the system at risk of stranded assets. The pattern is clear. Utilities build infrastructure to serve data centers, then spread those costs across all ratepayers, not just the data centers that necessitated the infrastructure, through rate-based recovery mechanisms. The third challenge is perhaps the most concerning for our climate and clean energy future. Under Illinois' Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, we have aggressive clean energy targets, 40% renewable by 2030 and 50% by 2040. But here's the problem. ComEd's 28 gigawatt data center pipeline would require the equivalent of over 37 gigawatts of new wind and solar projects in the next 15 years to meet the state's renewable energy obligation just for this new load. That is massive new renewable development competing for limited transmission capacity, project sites, and interconnection queue positions. The immediate result, this massive increase in electricity demand is driving new natural gas plants, delayed retirement of coal plants, and renewed interest in nuclear power. While nuclear is carbon-free, the speed and scale of data center growth is outpacing our ability to build clean energy fast enough. Now, these three challenges require immediate policy action. But the good news is that solutions exist, and states are beginning to implement innovative approaches like demand flexibility and bring your own generation requirements. Let me now turn it back to Brad to discuss these emerging policy responses and what ELPC is doing to address these critical challenges.
Thanks, Saad. As Saad, just went through over the last 20 minutes, the rapid growth of data centers creating a lot of risks in the Midwest. Heard a lot about those risks, but let's now focus on the opportunities. First, let's take note of the climate and clean energy commitments made by the companies building these data centers, many of these data centers. These are some of the wealthiest and most powerful companies on the planet. And at a time when the federal government is pulling back on clean energy, let's ask these companies to step up. We can leverage their commitments to unlock billions of dollars of clean energy investment and creative solutions. Next slide, please. ELPC is seizing opportunities to advocate for new policies to address the challenges we're facing. We have three primary goals. First, states should require tech companies to fully cover the costs of connecting new data centers to the electric grid, so those costs are not unfairly shifted to the rest of us. Second, we need to protect Midwest communities from local air and water pollution impacts. And this is especially important for projects built near the Great Lakes. And third, we can't let fossil fuel interests use load growth as an excuse to abandon our climate and clean energy goals. We need policies to accelerate clean energy momentum and leadership. I'm going to focus on the third point today, but each of these goals are important, and other ELPC staff and advocates around the Midwest are working to achieve them. So what is ELPC up to? As I mentioned at the outset, this is an extraordinarily busy time for ELPC's clean energy team. We're in active litigation in 5 data center cases in 4 Midwest states, and it seems like more cases are coming almost every month. There's not time to discuss each of these cases in detail, but I do want to explain ELPC's overall strategy as we think about engaging in cases around the region. First, you may have heard former US Supreme Court Justice William Brandeis's famous description of states as laboratories of innovation, and we take that to heart. When deciding when to engage in a case, we think about the issues at stake, whether we have a reasonable path to win, and whether there's the potential to replicate that success in other states. ELPC follows this innovate and replicate approach in the Midwest and across regions in collaboration with colleagues at the Southern Environmental Law Center in the Southeast, Western Resource Advocates in the Mountain West, and Conservation Law Foundation in New England. Collectively, our 4 organizations cover 28 US states, which is a lot of laboratories. Next slide, Saad. I'd like to zoom in, if I could, on just one innovative state policy that I think will give you a feel for the kind of laboratory of innovation approach. And it's an approach we'd like to anchor in at least one Midwest state over the next 6 months. As Saad was describing earlier, prices and pollution rise when electricity demand outstrips clean energy supply in the market. We're advocating for policies that require tech customers to bring their own clean energy when they propose new data centers. This bring your own approach, sometimes referred to as a BYO policy. So what does this look like in practice? There's 2 essential steps. First, we need to persuade state lawmakers or regulators to adopt BYO clean energy requirements for large load customers. We believe these requirements should be flexible to accommodate different strategies and approaches. Importantly, however, they should require new investment in new generation projects, not just repurposing existing wind, solar, and nuclear power plants for data centers. To the extent possible, these plans should accommodate both on-site and off-site investments in renewable energy, battery storage, and process improvements to increase efficiency and demand flexibility. Sometimes you hear about an energy campus approach where the data center is putting batteries right on site or implementing things that can shift their demand or move process and computing power between data centers, depending on grid needs. The second key step is to empower state regulators to review and fast track BYO projects that meet or exceed the state standards. The best applications with the most clean energy and the most innovation should be rewarded by connecting them to the grid first. We think there's great potential here. Data centers are in a race against each other to secure access to electric power. Our goal is to create a race to the top, not a race to the bottom. A race to the top will unlock win-win solutions that accelerate grid connections for power-hungry data centers while protecting other customers and the environment. Now, this is just sort of an in-depth description of one policy we're working on in combination with a host of other types of policies and innovations to protect customers and protect clean air and clean water. But at this point, we'd like to wrap up the presentation part of the webinar today and then kick it back to Karsten to moderate some discussion and questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Brad and Saad, so much. Just a quick reminder, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or in the Q&A box. And this is an issue area with so many things to be discussing. I just want to remind everyone again, we only have the ability to focus on clean energy in this time frame. So we welcome your questions, and I will start with one for Brad, which is, while you're focusing on clean energy, this bring your own clean energy and its benefits for the environment, clean air and clean water, are there other benefits that this bring your own clean energy model might provide, whether it's for utility planning, consumer protection, or reliability? Like, does it have other impacts as well?
Yeah, thank you, Carson. It's a good question. We think it has a range of benefits beyond just environmental benefits, and I'll maybe mention a consumer protection benefit here. As noted on one of Saad's earlier slides, I think, and something that all of us, clean energy advocates are painfully aware of is that our electric utility business model right now isn't well matched for holding costs down and directing investment towards clean energy. In fact, utilities have sort of an inherent business model incentive to build stuff. So there's a dynamic happening right now where they're getting these applications from data centers, even when the forecasts are uncertain, and we think many of these forecasts are overheated and not realistic. The utilities are using those forecasts to propose developing a lot of new power plants. A lot of those are gas plants, or as Saad mentioned, keeping old coal plants in service longer than originally intended. So that has both climate and health impacts, but it also hurts our pocketbooks. We think that this bring your own clean energy approach, instead of moving all of this through the utilities, where they're going to build big, long-lived gas plants that last out there for 50 years against a lot of uncertainty, right? That creates risks. What if AI is in a bubble? What if some of these forecasts are overheated? The utilities have gone out and built a power plant that's going to be there for 50 years. We all are going to have to pay for that. So the bring your own clean energy approach, we think, is much less risky. It allows for incremental investments. It puts the risk on the data center customers rather than the rest of the utility rate base. It's incremental. We think of it really as a no regrets approach. So good for the environment, but also good for ratepayers.
So it avoids this concept of stranded assets where we overbuild for infrastructure that we don't end up needing.
And this is a place where our interests as environmentalists are very aligned with consumer advocates, low-income advocates, community advocates. They're concerned someone's going to have to pay for this infrastructure if it's not used and paid for, by the customers. And there's just so much uncertainty right now that this is, I think, one of the primary risks of the moment.
Thanks, Brad. The next question, we talk about this bring your own clean energy plan that's proposed in states, like Illinois or Minnesota. So what's in it for the data center, and like what's stopping a data center from going to a state that doesn't require bring your own clean energy? Is it a win-win? What's in it for them?
Yeah, it's another good question, and I think we're very deliberate in trying to design policies that have multiple benefits that, as you mentioned, could be described as a win-win. This is not a policy that aims to erect barriers or walls around the state to prohibit investment or prohibit data center development. We think not only is that not a realistic approach, but it will then just create leakage where the data centers are going to states that have no standards, perhaps, right, and have lax environmental regulation, and could, on net, just increase carbon emissions and pollution. So by looking at this kind of speed to grid idea with a BYO approach, there are benefits for data center customers that actually put pen to paper and put their thinking caps on and try to design a cleaner approach. For them, that gives them a competitive edge against other competitors, right? And gets them potentially at the front of the line. That's really attractive for them because right now, access to energy is the bottleneck that is slowing down the development of these projects. And right now, a lot of the companies, they're all in a big kind of tangled mess in these utility interconnection queues. They don't know when they're going to get out of it. So the speed to grid idea, it's that race to the top. We give them an opportunity to get out of that tangled, uncertain queue, get to the front of the line, get their project built, get an edge on their competitors. And in the meantime, these are we have that powerful incentive to have something clean.
So we use this idea of an arms race, competition to our advantage, and we offer, incentives almost.
That's right. And speed, right now, money is not the incentive. The data center companies, sure, they'd be happy to get tax breaks, they'd be happy to get incentives. What they really want is time. They want speed to grid. That is the most powerful incentive for them.
Gotcha. And lest we forget, these big tech companies, most of them have these ambitious climate goals. So we're also helping them achieve their own goals as well in the process.
Let's put their money where their mouth is and see it in practice.
Um,
And these policies will give them an opportunity to do that.
Right.
Most importantly.
I'd
Saad,
like
did
to
you have
add,
something?
yeah, I'd like to add one more point here. We are seeing big tech companies kind of having recognized this, that power is what is important for them. So they're investing in small modular reactors, in developing those and in advanced geothermal technologies. And we also saw in Nevada that Google partnered with NV Energy, where they got a tariff system called clean transition tariffs, where they help build these clean power plants from firm energy from geothermal. And so we are seeing the data center companies acknowledging this and moving in that direction.
Right, thank you. We're also seeing a lot of questions about storage. How does storage play into this bring your own clean energy model?
Yeah, storage plays a key role. And I think it goes back to Saad's slides on capacity price increases. The constraint for supply right now is really driven by a handful of days, where we are seeing peaks that are creeping up into the reserve margins set by PJM and MISO. These are peak days. If we can identify when those days are and use storage to shave them down, mitigate them, move power around, we can avoid these very high prices that are then going to be, and the high prices are used to justify investment in new gas generation. So storage is very, very important. There are storage policies, here in Illinois, there's a legislative proposal to really jumpstart storage industry, get more built on the grid. We think that's going to have tons of advantages for ratepayers and the environment. And I think we want to see as much innovation as we can in that area.
So storage kind of plays into this idea of flexibility. In addition to clean, flexibility is also really important. So storage sort of allows for that.
Exactly. Flexibility. And, there is a lot of interest now in concepts like flexible operation and actually electricity rates that reward customers that commit to be flexible and maybe be dialed down on those peak days that I mentioned. Sometimes you hear that referred to as a non-firm service tariff or curtailable load. And that's another policy that we think has a lot of merit. And I'll defer to Saad on this if he wants to describe the testimony he filed at the Illinois Commerce Commission just 2 weeks ago that includes this kind of non-firm service tariff idea.
Yeah, so we're seeing these ideas pop up in different states, and we recommended that the commission require that these data centers come with their own generation so that we know that we have enough supply to serve their needs. And those who do not have solid plans of how to serve their load, then they should be served with this non-firm interruptible tariff, which allows for them being flexible. This does not mean that their electricity will be taken off without them knowing. They get notice in advance, and they should be prepared to curtail their load. And storage is a way for them to, in this curtailment, serve their power needs.
So you're saying the less comprehensive the data centers plan when applying for electricity, the closer to the front of the queue they are to have their supply cut off in events of load stress. But like you said, it wouldn't be sudden or unexpected. They sign up for this and they know this, they're sort of volunteering to say, hey, you can cut our supply first up if needed, right?
Yes.
And
Okay.
again, this is one of those, we think, win-win policies. Instead of just saying, no, you can't connect at all if you don't have your own energy supply, go somewhere else, we're saying yes, and we can move forward with this project. We can allow this investment to occur under a non-firm service tariff while you work through the process to procure or build enough clean energy supply to serve you over time. There can be milestones in that plan. So it's a way to get things going faster, but while protecting the rest of us and encouraging clean and flexible approach.
And to add to that milestone point, Brad, most of these data centers, all the load that they're requiring or they're asking is not going to come at once. It's going to be ramped up gradually over the period of next 15 years. So this allows for them also to ramp up their clean energy procurement, which is a more practical ask.
And this transitions nicely into a question we have. Saad, your testimony does. And first, I'd like to start by saying, can you let us know what a large load tariff means? The word tariff pops up a lot. That's really like some electricity lingo. But can you first help us define what a tariff means, but also how do large load tariff matters through commissions like you proceeding in the ICC? How do those provide opportunities for change?
I'm not a lawyer, but I'll take a shot at the definition of a tariff, even though we have a lawyer on the panel. A tariff are the terms and conditions of how electricity is provided and what the customer is going to pay and how those costs are distributed for different services. So it's the detailed description of the service and the cost for it. And what happens there is there's a cost of service study, which is done to understand what are the costs required to serve these different services that are provided to these customers by the utility. And once they are established, then based on who uses what, how much of each service, they get assigned those costs so that there's a fair allocation of costs through these tariffs. And these tariffs do that job of defining who causes the costs and who should bear those costs. And when you talk about large load tariffs, since these large loads have a very different characteristic compared to other loads, say a residential customer or a small business, they bring with them their own costs and challenges and their own dynamic of how they cause these expenses. So that is why a lot of these utilities are recognizing that we cannot equitably or properly, fairly charge these data center customers with the existing tariffs. So we need to come up with more terms and conditions that capture the costs and the expenses of these data centers and then make them pay their fair share. And that's the effort towards these data center tariffs.
So these large load tariff cases with commissions, these are the venues where our regulators are getting together with experts like you to solve these problems that we're discussing today, right?
Yeah, that's right. One way to think about this is, historically, utilities are publicly regulated. And so all of their prices and terms and conditions have to be filed with a regulator. And in the states, every state in the country, there is a state agency that reviews all of these rates and regulations and tariffs and determines if they're just and reasonable. So in these cases that we're getting involved in, for the first time, we have these mega large customers that are asking for power service. The utilities don't have rules written specifically for this kind of customer because this kind of customer has never existed. There've been large industrial customers before, but nothing that on one site, as Saad described earlier, has the equivalent power demand of a medium-sized US city, right? So the utilities have to develop their own rules and regulations and prices for how they're going to provide service to these customers. All of those are getting developed in real time right now. Many utilities are filing their very first tariffs for these, covering these kinds of large load customers. And threshold legal questions and economic questions are getting decided in these cases, which is why it feels so important for ELP, for us, for our clean energy team and other advocates to be in those cases. Otherwise, those are going to be backroom negotiating deals that get presented to commissions as kind of take it or leave it settlements. So that's why we're there. That's why we're spending a lot of nights and weekends in the office. And that's why Saad has, Saad and I have each other on speed dial as we're working on testimony.
So Brad, you said the utilities don't have rules for electricity users of this size. This has never happened before. And I think that might help answer another question that we got, which is a little less technical than large load tariffs, but it's why are these costs being socialized among customers? That's not how it's supposed to work.
There are some fundamental legal principles for electric utility service. Number one is that the cost causer should pay for the costs the utility spends to serve them. And number two, the beneficiaries of electric utility infrastructure should pay for those costs through their rates. Both of those principles are being challenged right now because we're using old rules applied to this new circumstance of having one customer. When you think about your house or a small business, you've got poles, you've got wires, you've got a service drop that comes from those poles to your home. You don't pay specifically for the utility's cost to drop that service line to your home individually. We socialize that cost because there are millions of customers that are similarly situated that have poles and wires that serve them. So it's fair, it's more efficient, it's just easier to socialize those kinds of service costs. That makes sense. We have rate cases and we scrutinize those costs to make sure they're fair and reasonable, but we're okay socializing that kind of cost. We're using those same rules now because we're making the rules as we go. Those same rules are now being applied to these huge customers that on their own use the same amount of power as a US city. It doesn't make sense to socialize the cost that you can identify to run high voltage transmission lines to serve that one customer. Yet we're still using these old policies. And I'd really encourage, if folks are interested in this, both to look at the Ari Pesco Harvard study that Saad linked, but also more recently, Mike Jacobs for the Union of Concerned Scientists wrote a very good paper on how transmission costs are being socialized. We are all paying for transmission lines being built specifically to serve large data centers. We're working on those issues, and Mike filed some good testimony for us in the ComEd case I mentioned. We need to fix those old rules and develop new ones that are appropriate for this kind of customer.
Great. As a reminder to folks, and Brad, thanks for mentioning that policy brief. We'll send a thank you email out to everyone who attended this webinar with links to the articles and reports that we mentioned. So you'll be able to check all of those out there. So stay tuned for that email. And we're coming up on time. Thank you all for a really lively conversation. And Brad and Saad, thanks so much for your hard work and what you do. So I just have one last question. And it's, what gives you hope that these data centers, AI, and clean energy can coexist?
Well, I'll take a quick shot and Saad, pitch it to you for the last word. But I think there's been so much quickly moving innovation in this space, and it's, as an advocate trying to keep up with the cases, there's a new report, there's a new case study, there's a new project, that almost every week we're reading about. So when you're in it, these seem like really, really daunting challenges, and it's, very complex technical and legal hurdles. But taking a step back, we're seeing a lot of resources put towards this problem. We're seeing lots of investment happening, and I'm confident we're going to come up with some solutions, both regulatory solutions and technology solutions to move us forward. So I'm I guess while it's going to take a lot of work, I do think that we're pointed in the right direction, and there are a whole lot of people working on this.
Saad, go ahead.
Yeah, what keeps me optimistic is similar to what Brad said. It's been a little over a year that data centers start coming into news almost every day. And since then, we have seen major regulatory bodies like FERC, state utilities, policymakers in every state at the national level, think tanks, advocates, big tech companies, everybody has focused on addressing this problem. And I feel like people from all areas that are related to this work are doing their job and trying to figure out this problem. So we are not sitting idly and just worrying about it, but we are getting together and trying to solve these issues through different innovative solutions. And seeing that happen every day, like Brad said, there's a different report, a new report every day. I think that keeps me optimistic that we are trying to meet the moment.
Great. Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. We've got a lot of bright minds, dedicated lawmakers, talented organizations, and people working on this issue. And ELPC and along with our partners, we're going to continue our work on this in the Midwest. We're going to do everything we can to help power the clean energy transition and to keep data centers paying their fair share and helping to power the clean energy transition and not derail it. So we covered a lot today. If you have questions about individual cases, testimonies, more specific questions, please reach out. You can reach out to me. You can find my email on the website and in the follow-up email that we'll send. Brad and Saad, thank you both so much for your time today and for the work that you do. We appreciate your expertise and your insights. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. Again, keep an eye out for that follow-up email and for future ELPC Thinks invitations.
Thank you. Thanks, Karsten. Thanks, Saad. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
To this ELPC Thinks webinar, The Data Center Dilemma. My name is Karsten Neumeister, and I'm a media relations specialist with ELPC. ELPC Thinks is where we bring experts, environmental leaders, and community partners together to forge new strategies